you know, there's that speech you gave during the hearings, and I wrote it down, but it was, you know, oaths matter, character matters, truth matters. If we do not renew our faith and commitment to these principles, this great experiment of ours will not endure.
Yeah, dude, it hit me the same way, actually. So this was the first time I've seen this since, obviously, the election. And I don't think I expected it to fall as differently as it did when I saw it before the election, you know? And I actually think that this is, it's so much more important now to show this. And, you know, in a way, it's probably good that it will come out after the election. So it probably wouldn't have made a difference before. But it's a reminder to people, like, you know, for me, I'm sitting there just like feeling an ache in my heart, particularly like, look at all we did on the January 6th committee. And America, did they reject that? Maybe, maybe not, but they certainly did not prioritize it as the most important thing. I have a lot of bitterness, to be honest with you, to Merrick Garland, because it was after that first hearing you guys saw is when DOJ then decided to start their investigation. Had they started when we did, they would have probably been at the point of indicting at the point we had our first hearing. But I think what this shows is, look, we're going to go through it for the next 4 years. Sorry, it's going to suck. The good news is, in 2 years, I think it's very likely Democrats win the House. Maybe you'll run again. I hope you do, by the way. Yeah, I do too.
So maybe you'll run.
So maybe we'll see. I'll take a deep breath for a while.
Kinzinger 28.
In an heartbeat.
Yeah. Well, but so like, you know, but we're gonna have for 4 years. It's gonna be rough. But it's not over. Literally, this experiment isn't over. We've been through tough times. We went through Trump 1. We're gonna go through Trump 2. But what this reminds me, and the thing I think this is so important is, Steve and I, obviously politically we're different, right? But it's a reminder to us that, like, those differences are actually things we should celebrate, really. Yeah. Politics used to be fun. Do you guys remember that? When you could, like, have a disagreement, and it was actually a good time and not, like, existential? And this shows how that should be. And it shows that what I call the uncomfortable alliance between the sane right, the center, and the left to save democracy.
So, you say the sane right, the center, and the left. I quote you on that.
Yeah, you do, actually.
I do. And I think, at its best, the hearings and that rough coalition are what can give us hope, right? Our politics shouldn't be the most important things about us. Our principles should be. But let's walk through kind of what you saw on the inside, because we went from a moment where, you know, I'd forgotten until I saw this film that Trump slunk away alone, right? No one was there to say goodbye. He was thoroughly repudiated by everybody. And then there are a couple of key moments, and you talk about them. There's Kevin McCarthy going to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. That kind of validates. There's the 3 weeks of silence, kind of a jump ball, and I think you make a really interesting point about how that could have been taken advantage of. And then there's McConnell pulling the punch. Right? I mean, and I remember being at CNN at the time, and I see Max Dawson here from CNN, producer extraordinaire. And I remember being like, that might not seem important right now, but that's a really fateful decision.
Yep.
How did you, in real time, understand, and your caucus members, Kevin McCarthy going to kiss the ring, when it wasn't clear he needed to?
Yeah, so first off, let me just say on the January 6th committee, the thing I am proud of now, I mean, I've always been proud of it, but I think it's especially important, is I still really believe in 10 years there's not going to be an American alive that ever admits they supported Donald Trump, because I think this train is going to end up wrecking so spectacularly that nobody will admit it, right? It's like, you know, my parents were probably big Nixon fans, but they'll never say it now. And so I think that part of it's very important. But if you look at that intervening time period, so Kevin McCarthy made the decision. Now, I think for about 3 weeks he was considering, do we throw Donald Trump under the bus? And actually, look, it wasn't even, do we throw Donald Trump under the bus? Donald Trump had been thrown under the bus already.
Right.
He left town completely dishonored. only the weirdest people like Matt Gaetz were still defending him. Literally, you could count on one hand the number of people that would still defend him. So this was a done deal. And Kevin McCarthy knew, though, that in order to become speaker, he could not take them on. Because if he would take them on, he can't get you have to get 218 votes to become speaker. He knew that he could not, he would engender enough people to be embittered against him that if he took on Trump, he wouldn't win the speakership. So he made the awful decision, not life-changing, history-changing decision to go down and kiss Trump's ass. And why did he do it? Because, well, he first off lied to us. I think Liz had called him and said, why'd you go down there? And he's like, oh, Donald Trump wasn't eating, and they wanted me to come down and, help spark him up. And he told a few of us others that, like, oh, no, I just happen to be in the area, and you're always going to have to go see a former president. Well, the reality is he knew that, frankly, the sane right would capitulate to whatever and he knew that if he went after Trump and embraced him, that he could unite 218 behind that. And he did. He did. McConnell's decision. So McConnell's sitting here going, okay, look, Donald Trump there's not a single person alive besides Fred Upton of Michigan,
right,
ironically, that told me that ever thought Donald Trump would run again. Fred Upton said he's going to run and win. I'm like, you're a liar, but no.
Fred Upton said that?
He did, yeah.
No shit.
We always call him the Upton prophecies because he has these like prophecies that come true. But, when McConnell decided, he's like, look, I don't want to take the tough political decision to vote to remove him. Donald Trump is persona non grata. And by the way, Justice Department will take care of that. He voted no and probably took 10 Republicans with him. Otherwise, Trump would have been removed and ineligible to run again.
Yeah.
So that whole intervening time, and I hope it came out strongly, the thing that really bothers me is that the 10 of us that voted to impeach, I was sitting here trying to get us to say, now's the time we have to take over the caucus because this is so bad and we have an opportunity. And all of them, quite honestly, just said, well, no, now's the time to heal.
So I'm going to press you on that because you basically made the point, look, corporations briefly said, fuck these people who voted to overturn the election, and you had a window to basically say, look, we're going to step in the breach, we're going to take care of the hard dollars of the politics, and that will change hearts and minds, right? LBJ famously said, you grab them by the balls, the hearts and minds will follow.
Yeah.
Money is apologize if there are any children in the room, but they're not. So but there are people recording, so it's okay. At that moment, I mean, did you have a clear sense that was the opportunity, and they really, because this goes to kind of like the comparative spinelessness of the center right, and I come from a place that I deeply believe the center right and the center left share much more in common, right? But to your point, the Gaetz crowd that tail could wag the dog for Kevin McCarthy, but the center right didn't have the spine to stand up. Yeah. What would you do differently now in making that case?
It's tough. Like, I would have to make the case. I mean, the big thing is like getting the other 9 to come on board, and again, all of them are heroic, all the other 9, because they voted to impeach Trump. That's a tough vote to take. But what happens is you take that vote. Again, your assumption then is Donald Trump. I mean, all of us believe Trump was done. So at that point, it becomes, how do I survive? I just took this vote that's going to kill me. How do I survive? Well, now it's time for the party to unify. It's actually not a bad thought, to unify behind positive principles for the future. The problem is, I realized, like, if you have the king down, what is it? You got to make sure you cut off his head. Proverbially, it's a violent time, so I got to make sure.
He's quoting The Wire, right?
You got to
go for the king. You best not miss, right?
Yeah. And you got to make sure you do that. And so that's why I wanted to do it. And their view, I can't blame them for it, was, no, we just need to come together and unite. And I think had the 10 of us actually, and maybe it wouldn't have succeeded, but it would have been a better than 0% chance that it would have. And we could have basically changed the tone and tenor of the GOP. And yes, it is cynical to say $300,000 from PACs downtown will get people to change their outspoken view on democracy, but it's a fact. And we could have used that to our advantage.
So for folks, when you cover Capitol Hill, you see there's a huge difference between what people say in private and what they say in public. Yeah. And what percentage of your colleagues understood that Trump was a threat to democracy that weren't willing to say it? What's that delta?
99%.
99.
Now, this is back then. Nowadays, crazies had been elected in the intervening time, like true believers. But at that day, everybody, I mean, even if you put Matt Gaetz on CIA truth serum, he probably would have said that Trump is a threat. He just doesn't care, because to him there's no higher principle than himself. But yes, everybody knew this. And this is the thing, for 3 weeks, I always point to the room when I talk about 3 weeks, because it's in my head. We would always meet as what we called a conference. So all 200 of us would get together in this big room, the Capitol Visitor Center, and we'd have our what we called family discussions that got really heated. But there was nobody in that intervening 3 weeks that was standing up saying, we have to embrace Donald Trump. Now, they were pretty quick to say it after he went to Mar-a-Lago, but it was 3 weeks of utter silence. And anything could have changed that. And I think 99% of them, maybe 100%, realized he was a threat. They didn't have the courage to do something.
And sometimes history's in these windows.
Yeah.
Right? And at the time, there are all these sort of ornate excuses people can make. And some sound really high-minded. We got to heal.
Yeah.
One of the things, that was great to see your parents, by the way. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I can see, the system works. You're a mix of them.
Although all the Kinzinger guys are like 6'5", except me. But I look like them, so I know it's legit. I got the short jeans. Skipped over.
You got the moral stature.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but I remember covering at the time the letters that
Yeah.
family members were writing, and it's one thing to have strangers hate you. That's kind of the cost of doing business in the public eye, unfortunately. How did that hit you when you first confronted it? Were these like distant folks, or were these people who were family?
They're family. They're like dad's cousins. So, I'd see them every couple of years or every twice a year or whatever at the Wiener Roast, Illinois. We do those, and then, the family reunion and stuff. But yeah, I mean, here's the ironic thing. So for those that are unaware, did they show it? I think they showed it. That big letter that came, said I was part of the Devil's
Briefly,
Army.
yeah. Devil's Army, that's right.
I didn't live with my parents, of course. I lived in my district. I went to see my folks probably once a month, maybe once every couple months. And the day I happened to go see my folks, this certified letter shows up just by happenstance. And I see it. It's from my dad's cousins. And I actually was naive enough to think maybe they were going to say, hey, thanks. I know it's tough, but thanks for doing it. And I open it up and I just read this. And look, it was angering. I didn't realize the impact it had on me at the time, because I talk about this in the film where I'm like, look, I'm just in battle, and what I'm doing is making the next step. And it's not till a fight's over where you realize the toll it took. You probably feel that a little with after running for Congress. Like now all of a sudden you realize, like, that was hard. It took a lot out of me. There's a lot that goes into that. Well, that was the case here. And so I was very angry. I also was like, this doesn't bother me. It does now. But more than anything, it reminded me that there are people that's brains are so rotted. And look, my family intends well. They truly believe that God is on the side of Donald Trump. It's jacked up, but they believe that. They come from good intentions, but they've been abused and manipulated by Fox News, by their church, whatever it is, to actually believe what they believe.
So let me press on that point. You are a conservative, and I want to get your definition of what that means right now.
Yeah.
Right, and we can nerd out on Edmund Burke and all that shit. But first, let's talk about you as a Christian, right, and how that informs your politics to some extent, but more importantly on a deeper level, right, your faith. How you understand your cousins saying you're part of the Devil's Army? How you understand within, and we'll go deep here, within some divine plan, what just happened?
Look, I believe in free will, so I think that's some of what just happened. And look, I understand, because I was raised if anybody ever heard of Independent Fundamental Baptist, like, it's a cult, basically, to let you know. But it's
I know, I have not.
Yes, it's like, this is the it's the old Footloose, so like no drinking, no dancing, no smoking.
No shit, really? John Lithgow?
It really existed. But I was in that till I was like probably 15. I was the biggest rebel, by the way, so I wasn't necessarily good. But then, I just consider myself now Protestant, non-denominational. But I can speak that language, so I understand kind of where they're coming from. Obviously, very much disagree, but what I'm able to do now as a Christian is to kind of look at this with fresh eyes. That's part of the great thing of kind of being freed of partisanship, in essence, is I can look at everything with fresh eyes and be like, no, the Jesus that I follow actually said telling the truth and treating people with respect and having your arms open for the poor and the least among you, you do unto me. That's his words. His words are not shut the border down, which we have to have border control, but it's not be angry, it's not be divisive, it's not go after gay people, it's not this and this. And I think my faith has actually been really a powerful tool in helping me to get to where I am now, because I was able to reset how I saw things and be like, okay, what is truly a good Christian viewpoint of this? And it's not what I was raised, but I don't want to say it's not what I was raised believing. It's not what the Republican Party is putting out there.
Right. And I was talking to Ryan Holiday, the Stoicism.
Love him, brother.
Ryan's great, right? Yeah. And I've been digging into that and the Bible, and it seems like this is a moment to sort of look for deeper bearings, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's, one of the things that's impressed me is that we just had what, from a standpoint of fighting for the truth, is the worst case scenario, right? Trump just won the popular vote. And yet there's a lot of threat. You had threats on your life back then. Now you got appointees to positions who are promising to, really their only criteria is they're going to advance Trump's revenge bet, including Kash Patel. And I want to talk about Patel in a second. And yet you said very clearly, fuck that, I'm not going to be afraid. Be not afraid, right? You didn't quit. You just said, no way. I'm not going to let them get in my head. Not going to let them get in my heart. There are a lot of folks right now who are retreating.
Yeah.
In the face of this, but psychologically it's a lot safer, right? Why the fuck would we want to get all emotionally wrapped up around the disaster that's coming down the pike? And you say, you know what? Fuck them. I'm not going to be afraid. Where do you find that strength?
Look, it's part of it is
like strength, like you're fancy. I mean, like, because you got reason to be concerned about Kash Patel or whoever coming after you, and yet you're dismissing that.
Part of it is I'm just a fighter. I refuse to let them win. I also know, I think you're a historian too, I think in historical terms, and I'm like, either this country will fail, in which case none of this matters, or we're going to look back at this time period and be like, holy shit, we were in a really bad position, right? And we came out of that. And frankly, I'm not doing it for this reason, but I wouldn't mind being written down as one of the people that helped fight to save this country.
By the way, you already are.
Thanks. But I wouldn't mind my son Googling his last name and being proud of it and not being ashamed. That makes a big difference. But the other thing is this. Look, the thing that makes me more, I've been saying angry a lot. I'm not an angry person, but it's family talk here. The thing that has really bothered me of late is when you see people like in my kind of situation that are talking about moving to UK, or they're like, we're scared, we're going to go away, stop it. You look guilty when you do that. There's nothing we did that was wrong or illegal. You want to come after me? You have to make something up. And if you make something up and put me in jail, I'll be like Nelson Mandela and just make your life from jail absolute hell and send out letters every day, call you corrupt, and I'll be 3 times the burden I've ever been in your life, right? And that's where I'm looking at it like, come after me, bring it, because I don't think they will. In the depth of it, Donald Trump is the weakest, whiniest person.
That's right.
He's scared to death. And if you show you're fearful, that lets him win. If you're like, I'm not going to be bowed, it actually intimidates him.
That's the fucking thing. Is that strong men are really secretly weak, and if you show weakness, you invite their aggression.
That's so true.
It's total truth, and I think you're modeling that well right now. So let's in general. So let's not right now. You're doing a terrible job. Looking at the appointments, when Trump announced Gates, I couldn't help but thinking Kevin McCarthy's got to be just. And there was all this bullshit. Oh, this is some great strategy, so he can push the bullshit. But the combination of Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel in particular is serious. I want to focus on Patel because he was interviewed at the January 6th Commission, and for a guy who's in deep with the Steve Bannons and the I'm blissfully forgetting the name of the My Pillow guy. Thank you, Mike Lindell. Thank you. His January 6th testimony was like, I was surprised as everybody else. I got nothing. What are your thoughts on the nomination of a guy like Cat? First of all, his testimony around January 6th, but also his nomination to be like an FBI director. I mean, is that just a joke to you, or do you take that serious?
Oh, it's very serious. Like okay, so whenever Donald Trump accuses you of something,
It's a confession.
it's a confession. So when he talks about Democrats weaponizing the FBI and the DOJ, it is in his mind to do that, and that's what Kash Patel is to him.
Mm-hmm.
Kash Patel is the guy that's going to go there and make J. Edgar Hoover look like a Catholic priest, and because that's exactly what he intends to do. Kash Patel is steeped in conspiracy theory. One of the big drivers of January 6th, quite honestly. I don't remember a ton of his testimony, but he acted like some innocent bystander in all this. He actually was the one trying to get, who was it? He actually had Mark Meadows, in essence, trying to send investigators to Italy for the satellite conspiracy. That satellites were hacking the voting machines. Kash Patel was the driver of that. And this man has made it clear. He put out in his book an enemies list with named people who he's going to go after if he's FBI director. The thing we need to remember as Americans is the FBI generally has been non-political because we've made the decision to keep it that way, but that's not a requirement. It could be political if they basically decide to, because they're under the executive branch, and I think that's the danger we really run into now.
So how much faith do you have in a guy like John Thune, who won a secret vote against Rick Scott being the MAGA candidate? Because a lot hangs on John Thune and the Senate not doing what they did under McConnell, which is not neutering themselves constitutionally, but actually advising consent, at least on the Gabbards and the Patels and the Hegseths. How much faith do you have in that?
Well, it seems like they actually are making it very clear that they're going to take the vote. I was worried because we had heard these rumors that actually, Thune was required to say he would allow recess appointments, and I still think that's a real threat, by the way, particularly with Kash Patel and some of those others. But it seems like they're taking their advice and consent seriously. Gates was tanked by them without having a hearing yet. I just read that Lindsey Graham is saying that Hegseth is in trouble, and he says Hegseth has to answer these questions. Tulsi Gabbard, really dangerous, by the way. I cannot see somebody like James Lankford or even Tom Cotton, who I don't really like, but I think he's going to be head of the Intel Committee, actually saying, yes, let's trust our nation's secrets to her. RFK is probably in, but yeah, I think they're going to stand up a little bit on that, but I also recognize that every time they reject a nomination, it becomes much less likely that they do it to another one, because you're kind of like, you get so much energy to oppose Trump, and then you're like, okay, now I have to go into my shell and recuperate and make my base love me again and make Trump love me again. So you probably only get a couple shots out of the rifle.
Yeah, I think that's right. Before we go to questions, just one, what do you see as the future of the center right? The future of the conservative movement as you understand it?
Yeah, the center right will always exist. So I call myself a conservative. I'd say I'm moderate conservative is probably the best way to put it. So center right. Look, every country, by the way, every healthy democracy needs a movement on the right and a movement on the left. And it's that tug and pull that actually creates kind of a proper, way to go forward. The left tries to pull forward sometimes when the country's not ready. The right holds back when the country is ready. And so that's in tension, and usually the two work together well to kind of move us at the right pace. So there will always be that. The problem is the real, actual healthy kind of center-right movement is not the Republican Party. It's like maybe 5% of us out there in the country, because those that call themselves Republicans now, there's truly nothing conservative about them at all. There's nothing conservative, embracing Russia, exploding the deficit, making government bigger, more powerful, more in your life is the opposite of conservatism. And that's what they stand for. So what's the future? I don't know.
So I call them radicals, right? Because they're radical traditionalists. Before we go to questions, I got one more for you. It kind of goes back where it began. How do you understand, morally and patriotically, the results of this election?
It's tough. Look, we're in the middle of a massive political realignment. Now, here's my theory. If you were a social voter for the Republicans, or you're voting for the Democrats for social reasons, you are still a Republican or a Democrat. If you were doing that 30 years ago, you're still that way. So like if you're a social conservative, you're probably voting Republican. If you were an economic voter, So if you were an economic Republican or an economic Democrat, you've switched parties. So that's why unions are trending towards Republicans and college educated now are trending towards the Democrats. So what I see is a battle between not college and college educated, which shouldn't exist, and then a gender gap. And let me just be very clear on the gender gap. I think this is important. And it may tick some people off. For the last 15 years, young men were told that everything masculine was toxic.
Yep.
Okay? And what happens is, if you're a young man and you're told that masculinity is toxic, you begin to try to figure out, okay, what are these feelings I have? What is my place in this world? And you get resentful. And in that vacuum, Donald Trump comes along with actual toxic masculinity. But in a vacuum of any other example of masculinity, these young men are drawn to that because it's the only example they see. And that's why I say, men, we've got to take back masculinity and talk about what healthy masculinity is. And not be ashamed to talk about it. Healthy masculinity is fighting for people. It's punching up. It's defending the weak, right?
Yep.
That's healthy. That's how we bring young men back. And that's a concern, is this gender gap is really dangerous in this country.
I co-sign that. All right.